I see the dark Redditors, groypers, are really upset about me saying genes don't exist. How outrageous! How is anyone going to take you seriously? Reddit's down the hall and to the left. Yeah, thanks for admitting you don't have any fucking independent thinking whatsoever. Just because something sounds ridiculous to you, you dismiss it. You're a bitch and you're cattle. You're not even human. You are subhuman cattle. Why the fuck are you anywhere near our post? Why are you anywhere fucking near us, you subhuman cattle? I will fucking curb stomp anyone you send to debate me on this topic. Oh, you deny genes? Yeah, I do, bitch. What are you gonna fucking do about it? You're nothing. You are nothing. You're a pissant. Just because something is conventionally accepted by institutions full of fucking retards who don't actually think about these things they take for granted, doesn't mean we all have to just accept them because the alternative sounds ridiculous. I don't give a fuck how anything sounds. What is true and what is not true? You fucking Reddit bitches, shut the fuck up and know your place. It's very simple. The idea that a biological organism emerges as a consequence of some code of information that, gives what exactly instructions? That's another thing. Gives what instructions? What is being given instructions? It's so philosophically and conceptually stupid to say that DNA codes for the entire organism. No, it fucking doesn't. Because at no point is an organism autonomous, at no point is DNA detached from the organism. For example, even in the most elementary case, right, which is the fertilization of eggs, the sperm cells that fertilize the egg, right? A lot of retards think that sperm just carries DNA. No, it just carries so much more than that. If sperm only carried DNA, the fertilization of the egg and the development of a fetus would not be possible. Sperm carries a lot more than just DNA. We're talking about at no point in the process of heredity and reproduction does something exist independently of an organism. Every step of the way, there is a living organism. Okay, so for example, I don't have to teach basic biology. In the womb, okay, where the fetus develops, there's no DNA, there's no code of information that's somehow separate or even that exists in the first place. The whole thing is metaphysics. The idea that organisms emerge as a consequence of codes of information that are blueprints for the organism's characteristics is just metaphysics. It was made by Mendel, who is a medieval scholastic, and this is why these people are probably defending the pedophile Mendel, who diddled children probably, because it's part of their theology, I guess. I don't fucking know. But it's not based in fact. It's not based in reality. No one can point to how DNA actually puts the proteins that it codes for, and even claiming that DNA codes for proteins is extremely misleading. We literally had a fucking, a genetics student literally just admit that in our debate the other night, right? So even the idea that it codes for proteins is incredibly misleading. It plays an indispensable and important role in the, production is a weird word, but the production of proteins, But how everything fits together, which cells are produced, what kinds, how they fit into a larger structure. DNA tells us there are no genes. It's like a completely useless concept when it comes to biology. There's been no shown mechanism for how you go from DNA to a fucking fully structured living organism, because it's an absurdity. There's this idea that DNA is like a seed and a womb is just like soil or so. There's always been these analogies, throughout history, I guess. But there's no independence from the organism as a unified metabolism, okay, that we can say, we see viruses out in the wild that just are dormant, lying there without any organisms. So this is why the pederast Epstein scientists make up these silly little notions of RNA world or whatever, right? Which is complete nonsense. Like, as if viruses are just a consequence of random things that are happening at the volcanic subterrestrial level. I just want to be clear. Scientists literally have no fucking clue how characteristics are inherited. Scientists literally don't know. It's for a long time been assumed that the characteristics are inherited and transmitted through this code of information. It's like a fucking computer, I guess, where you're sending the data. When a guy busts in a woman, he's busting a fucking USB stick and sending fucking data to her womb. And this is literally what retards in science have been trying to sell us, and it has borne no fruit. It has borne no fruit when it comes to actual empirical results that can show us any underlying mechanism for how that's happening. All we know is that DNA has something to do with the encoding of proteins. We don't know how anything else works or how anything else fits together. We don't know what is ultimately animating life. We don't ultimately know how organisms come to be. We don't know how characteristics are actually transmitted. Now, these retards are trying to make it seem like I'm denying heredity, that I'm denying that an organism is inheriting the characteristics of its parents. Of course it is. I'm not denying that organisms inherit the characteristics of their parents. That's just a basic observation we can see in nature from basic biological reproduction. We all fucking know that. But the idea that they're doing it through this code, of course Mendel, who's a fucking backward, feudal, pedophile scholastic, wants to think this, because this notion that, oh, it's just a transmission of books, it's just a transmission of datum, it's a transmission of this code of information. It's such a nonsense, pagan notion that has no base. He began with a theological or whatever assumption, and he imposed that on reality. Everything they accused Lysenko of was actually true for Mendel. Mendel began with ideological assumptions, then he imposed them on reality, and then in 2025 we've discovered that the Mendelian dogmas and paradigms totally debunked, totally outdated. I don't think there's a single scientist in the history of humanity who's been more discredited in modern history, in the history of biology, than Mendel, okay? But why do we still have this notion of genes? Well, because we're in the information age. Majority of human beings are kind of like cattle when it comes to their ideological obscurity, because it's just a one-for-one analogy of the productive forces. Like back in the 1700s, everyone thought animals were just mechanical automata, similar to metal gears moving or whatever. And then there were all sorts of other analogies that people would come up with when electricity became a dominant paradigm. And then when we entered the information age, which is a qualitative step away from the simple machine age, we started using paradigms from information theory to explain everything, including biology and life. So we said heredity is a transmission of information. Biological organisms are like computers, and they're just transmitting information to one another. And the pure form of the information is a gene. And then Richard Retard Dawkins, who wrote The Selfish Gene, he was like, if there's genes, there must be other things called memes and ideas themselves. Buddy, that's what we're beginning with here. Your entire notion of a gene is downstream from the fact that we've become an information society. You're just projecting this onto biology. This notion of memes actually comes first, and genes come after, right? But Dawkins makes it seem like it's the reverse, when it's a consequence of, again, him being a subhuman, because he's not a Marxist. I'm sorry, to be a human being with sapience, you have to be a Marxist. Otherwise, we can just relativize you. You're a creature of the era that you live in. You have no awareness about what historical era you live in, so like everything about you can just be historicized. It's like if you were living in the Middle Ages, you'd be entirely predictable. Your entire worldview, everything you think, it would just be a one-for-one mystification of the productive forces and the relations of production that you live in. Marxists enjoy a relative autonomy because we have self-awareness. We know what epoch we're living in. We know the era that we're living in. And we're self-aware about how not being aware of that fact can make us draw these eternal metaphysical conclusions about how all life and biology... No, the honest truth is that biologists have no fucking idea how heredity actually works. We know that organisms inherit characteristics from their parents. We don't know what the mechanism of heredity actually is. We have no idea. Anyone claiming they know or they have an idea or they have a clue is full of shit. And these are just scammers who are continuing to get grants and money for their useless dead-end research, their GWAS SNP collection nonsense, which is completely fucking retarded, which bears no results. So this is just the fact. People are like, well, there's things that are genetically engineered. We can engineer animals. No, what you're doing is you're mutilating these animals in a lot of different ways, in ways that are not actually consonant with the logic of the organism. They'll genetically engineer mice, aka they'll modify the mice's DNA And sometimes they're able to get phenotypical differences because they can try to map how the protein fits in with the rest of the kind of structure of the organism, right? And everything is interrelated. So DNA is part of the metabolism, the wider metabolism. So they'll isolate part of the DNA to get a change in the phenotype. Maybe they'll have it grow some hair, they'll change its size or something. These are not actually changes that last generationally. Over generations, somehow there's a return to the norm, including with respect to the DNA. How the fuck is that happening? You know, scientists can't, to my knowledge, maybe I could be wrong, they can't mimic the so-called random process of mutation that happens in nature. Anytime they're trying to fuck with DNA, they're usually just killing the organism, or somehow there's a correction that occurs over generations where they're damaging the DNA, sure, but life finds a way to return to normal. How is that? Generationally, they'll modify DNA in plants and animals, and then over generations, all the phenotypical changes they've made disappear. How is that happening, right? So they're fucking lying. Yeah, the DNA repair mechanism. Yeah, so we don't fucking know anything about how traits are actually inherited or transmitted. But it's especially stupid to say, there's like some USB flash drive data that we're just, it's like when he busts in her, it's like USB Type-C port, and he just like kind of just like lightning charging fucking 50 gigs of fetus data into her. It's so fucking stupid. It's not what's going on at all. The minute the sperm races to the egg, the sperm is carrying a lot more than just DNA. A lot more. It's part of the living metabolism of the man is released into the woman. Her metabolism receives the part of the man, and her body's metabolism contributes to the development of a new life form, okay? Using part of the man's metabolism, because this is what people miss. Sperm are living entities. Sperm are not dead receptacles of genetic information. They are themselves living entities. And I'm not saying they're like animals with brains, but they are part of life. They're living, they're alive. So when they go and they fertilize the egg, this is not just like a USB stick that's just some dead thing or whatever. It's activating and catalyzing a life process. They're life forms. They're forms of life.